Trent,
Yeah, mate.
where are you?
Over here. Where are you?
Trent, what were you doing?
Well, initially I was up underneath that Amarok
Yep.
having a look because it's up on the ramp. But then when you interrupted me,
Yep.
I was looking at the tie downs in the back of the LDV.
The Billy cart.
What were you doing?
I was over at the Mercedes.
Oh, actually, let me just check. Yeah, so, yeah, the most expensive one. Funny
you were
that.
going to say that. Speaking of expensive,
Yes.
can you explain to everyone why we have over $500,000
Yep.
worth of dual cab utes here?
$500,000. It's
Yep.
a lot of money, isn't it?
is.
The reason we got $500,000 is because we've got 11 of them and
Yep.
they're about $50,000 each. We've assembled all these utes for the Car Advice Dual Cab Ute Mega Test. Let's take a look at the contenders.
SsangYong, it's probably a brand you've never heard of, but it does reside in 2 postcodes. It is absolutely mammoth. It's also got the biggest tray in the segment by a long shot and a really nice interior too. Could this ute here with a 7-year warranty be enough to take out the test?
It's easy to forget that the Mazda BT50 shares the same platform as the Ford Ranger. It does. However, Mazda hasn't taken the same road as Ford in making incremental changes to the vehicle over the course of its lifetime. So now it competes on value because it doesn't feel anywhere near as new as the newest in the segment.
While it may look the exact same as the day that it was originally launched, this is finally here. It is the Series 4 Nissan Navara, and it's one of the few utes in this segment that actually has coil spring suspension, which means it should be good out on the open road.
The Mitsubishi Triton has always been one of our favourites in the segment, and its value proposition is almost impossible to argue. They've changed the front end styling and it's got some of the best infotainment in the business.
The Chinese are coming. The LDV T60 represents good value for money, and you don't need to sacrifice your safety like you do in the other Chinese ute in this segment, the Great Wall. You get decent smartphone mirroring technology, plus an Australian ride and handling tune. But is it good enough to stick it to the rest of these utes?
The Isuzu D-Max is a tough as nails work truck. We know all about the diesel engine and its commercial origins. It is basic though, and you struggle to compare it with the others in the segment that cost a lot more money but have moved the game forward.
The Holden Colorado has one of the punchiest engines here thanks to its Duramax diesel, and it has a big ride and handling input from Holden's engineers right here in Australia. But is the dated interior and the slightly dated design going to hold it back?
The Toyota Hilux isn't just the most popular dual cab ute in Australia, it's the most popular vehicle in Australia, full stop. It got suspension revisions in 2017, it's a segment favourite, and now it has the tech and the safety inclusions to drag it kicking and screaming up with the leaders in the segment.
Designed in Australia, engineered in Australia, the Ford Ranger is about as Australian as all of these utes get. But does that mean it's going to conquer the group? We're going to put it through a whole stack of tests to make sure it stacks up.
The Mercedes-Benz X-Class is, as we all know, based on the Nissan Navara. This is the X250, and you have to spend a hell of a lot more money than this to get a full Mercedes-Benz driveline. Still, if badge credibility is your ultimate goal, the X-Class is top of the segment.
V6, this thing has a lot of power and a lot of torque, and it is incredible that you are getting all of that in this good package here as well. Good infotainment system, really fun to drive, and plenty of punch from the V6. This is the Volkswagen Amarok Core.
And for those of you who impatiently want to scrub through and watch the review of a particular ute, the time codes for the review of each ute are here on the screen now.
This is the Mercedes-Benz X-Class,
Yes.
and this is a real interesting one to try to work out how you feel about it, because when it first launched, it had a lot of promise,
Yep.
and it could potentially have really changed the game
Yep.
for the dual cab ute sector, much the same way as the Amarok had that opportunity when
Yep.
it came out. I think in the cold light of day, it hasn't really done that, has it?
Yep. And Trent, I was never sold on this thing.
No.
I always saw it as just another Navara, and I
Yep.
thought that perhaps when the V6 came, it would change the fortunes, but it definitely hasn't.
No.
This interior, while it is nicer in the higher spec models, this looks all incredibly cheap. The thing that frustrates me the most is the lack of storage. So this is our audio equipment. It fits nowhere. I can't put a phone anywhere in here.
No.
Who at Mercedes-Benz, when they were rejigging the Navara, thought, all right, well, let's get rid of all of its storage.
All of its storage?
Tradies don't need.
Well, that's no good.
Anywhere.
No, tradies don't carry keys, measuring tapes, phones, pencils, pens, notepads, wallets.
It's just insane.
No, tradies don't carry any of that stuff.
So,
why would they?
Look, this is why this car has really just not scored very well in our comparison test, because the judges have seen through it. They've seen that it really doesn't add any value over a Navara. In fact, it costs more. You're getting less, and it just doesn't feel like a Mercedes-Benz.
No, it doesn't feel like a Mercedes-Benz, you're absolutely right, and I just think it's let itself down a little bit, and I think it could have done more for the brand in terms of commercial vehicles. I guess it goes to show that just adding the right badge to a vehicle doesn't necessarily make it a guaranteed success, and I think that's what a lot of people thought would happen.
Trent, welcome to the early 2000s, when dual cab utes first became a thing.
Yes, the Isuzu D-Max. I was going to say that what this ute does is it shows you where the segment's gone, because once upon a time, this would have been completely par for the course, probably as good as anything else in the segment inside the cabin.
Yep. So let's talk about the negatives very quickly. So no auto headlights, no auto wipers, single zone climate control, the worst infotainment system here. So Trent, the issue with this car is that it is really starting to feel dated at the moment.
So it is.
Let's put that to one side, and also the price, because no one, and we always say this, no one in the history of Isuzu utes or SUVs ever pays retail price.
You wouldn't pay retail price, and okay, that's great. You get a good bargain.
Off it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The positives, the engine. It is virtually bulletproof.
Yeah,
right?
it is, and it's got commercial truck underpinnings. It's been around for a long time. We know that Isuzus just go forever, and they don't have a problem, and I think that's a point worth making.
It's actually quite capable once you throw a load on the back. It's got a 3.5 ton towing capacity. Recently, they softened up the suspension. They removed one of the leaves, but then made the rest stronger. So you had a slightly softer ride, but still have the same load lugging capability. Steering's nice. It is fairly comfortable. The engine's a bit noisy, but it really is just a dependable ute. It's kind of like the Hilux of Thailand.
It's absolutely the workhorse ute, and that's why you get a lot of people who talk about these as tow vehicles, touring vehicles, modifying them for off-road use. It's as tough as nails, and you really can't argue with that.
And a lot of people drive around Australia in MUX too.
They do, yep.
It really is an all-rounder. Yes, it may not have placed all that highly in the comparison, but to be honest, it's a car that doesn't really put a foot wrong. It just does what it says on the box.
This one's a bit of a forgotten ute in the segment, Paul, the Holden Colorado. It's always been a bit of a favourite. Obviously, Holden fans love it, and Ford fans hate it, and that's great. That's what we love about those two brands. But it tends to get overlooked a little bit now.
500 newton metres of torque.
It's got some power.
It is an absolute cranker of a thing. You've got a really good infotainment system, one of the best in the segment. Our judges said they liked it for the Apple CarPlay, the Android Auto. It's got a very convenient layout. It's had a lot of Australian engineering work done right here in Victoria as well. It's kind of hard to go wrong with it.
It really is. I really like the dashboard design, and I think this is up there with the Nissan really in terms of feeling like a car inside. It doesn't really feel like a truck. Amarok really started that ball rolling, but I think Nissan and Holden have taken it a step further. You're right about the power of the motor. It tows quite well. And while it's not necessarily the first one that people think about in this segment, it's one that people really should be thinking about, because you don't pay full retail price for it. Generally, you'll get a good bargain. And Holden need to sell metal at the moment, so I think they're going to be pushing you to get a good deal.
That's it, and just like the Ford Ranger, you can get this in an HSV trim. So the Ranger Raptor is their off-road sporty variant. You can get an HSV version of this as well, or you can go up to the Z71 if you want something that looks a little sporty. There are hundreds of accessories you can buy for this as well to really give it that feel on the road. So you're right, it is forgotten. It's just lacking a few safety features, and it's just lacking some of the polish that the other utes in the segment have. Trent, another step back in time.
Yeah.
Yep. This is the Mazda BT50. Now, the reason I say it's a step back in time is because this is what the Ford Ranger looked like when it was first launched in PX trim. There used to be an infotainment screen up there and then all your controls down here.
Yep.
Well, when
still
Ford
like
changed, this didn't.
I mean, look, that's the thing. We said this when we introduced each of the contenders in this test. This shares the same platform as a Ranger and always has. And look what the Ranger's done with continual improvements and upgrades. Now, while there's nothing intrinsically wrong with this Mazda, and it's proven to be a pretty reliable workhorse over the 10 years or however long they've been on sale, it begs the question, if you're going to sell the vehicle and you intend to keep selling the vehicle, why wouldn't you keep updating it?
Exactly, and I mean, some of the changes are pretty big. It's not just a facelift on the Ranger. The Ranger got EPAS, which is your electrically assisted steering rack. This still uses the hydraulic rack. This is only available with the 3.2 litre 5-cylinder engine. The Ranger now comes with the option of a 2 litre with the 10-speed automatic as well. And the Ranger got a raft of safety and tech upgrades, none of which this has. So, you know, it is feeling old.
This still feels like it's got the aftermarket audio system.
I mean,
Alpine, exactly. I think what's really interesting is it shows where the segment's gone, because once upon a time when this was new, it was up towards the head of the segment.
Oh, yeah.
May not have been the best ute in the class, but it was up towards the head of the segment, whereas now the segment has moved so far forward. There are so many vehicles that offer more than this because it hasn't been updated. So nothing intrinsically wrong, but just hasn't been updated as much as it should have been. Well, here we are, Paul, South Korea's entrant into the segment, and it's not a Kia and it's not a Hyundai, although it should be because they need a dual cab ute. SsangYong.
This thing is so good.
Just how quiet it is. Can't hear it.
I'm going to go full throttle.
That's
barely hear the thing is bloody
unbelievable.
going.
That is the quietest diesel in this test by a mile, isn't it?
The ride is fantastic. This sits on coil springs. It's well and truly the longest one here.
It's a monster of a thing.
Giant cab, giant tray.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of like the surprise package, and it has a USP. Its unique selling point is that it offers way more room than the rest of the utes in this segment.
Yeah, that's right. It's got an enormous tray, which works really well if you're using it for work. I think the pricing's good. You can read about that, obviously, in the full story. But, you know, SsangYong have always had, funnily enough, as far back as the Action Sport, they've always had a competitive offering in terms of what the product is. You know, coil spring rear end, carries the load well enough, rides really nicely unladen. It's just the challenge of getting people to buy it.
Yeah.
I think the negative that needs to be covered here is not crash tested, and in company where...
Look in the back there, you've got a lap
beat in the middle. I mean, really, it's 2019, that's not good enough. Not crash tested in a test where the majority are up around the 5-star mark at all times, and you know, we're criticising Amarok for not having second row safety, so I think that's a factor, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they overcome that with safety gear, like your AEB and that kind of thing. We also have a 7-year warranty as well, which is pretty competitive. So I'm going to keep a close eye on this thing. Heated and cooled seats as well, which is excellent for not the top spec. So I mean, it really does tick a lot of boxes here. So SsangYong Musso, the surprise ute in this test.
Absolutely.
Trent,
yes.
You need power. There is no other
Let me just put my
alternative.
foot
There
down.
it is.
Yeah.
Pinned right back into the seat.
On dirt, straight down there, unbelievable.
The problem is, V6 Amarok, this is cheap. You're getting the punchiest diesel here. But on top of that, it's permanent all-wheel drive, and you can do exactly what you did there, knowing that it's not going to start fishtailing and doing silly things.
And you know, it is aging, it is getting old, this thing, and it does feel... yeah, thanks. It does feel like it's, you know, a step behind now in terms of where the segment's gone. But it's easy to forget that this really redefined the dual cab ute segment when it first came out. Now, I said at the time that it could have gone even further than it did. They opted not to fit coil springs. There were a few things they didn't do. But this still, even though it is old, feels refined, feels quiet. I still like the cabin. The seats are great. You know, it needs updated infotainment and some changes there, but I think, the unique selling point of a V6 engine and full-time four-wheel drive is a big deal.
Yeah, but for the most part, it still is a really impressive rig. It's comfortable.
It is.
It's really inoffensive. But where it is offensive is things like no rear airbags,
Yeah.
which I just find completely bizarre, especially when you consider Toyota managed to make the 70 Series Cruiser a 5-star ANCAP car.
That's right.
And look at it.
Yeah.
It's literally just a bunch of
Yeah,
steel.
from another millennium. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's where Volkswagen's let themselves down with this vehicle, because it's otherwise been incredibly popular,
Yep.
sold really well. And the thing is that even though it's got those inherent issues with the safety, the things that this did well and has always done well, it still does well.
Yeah.
It really does. So it's still a compelling thing to buy. I'd probably buy it, but I don't need the second row, and I don't care about low range necessarily in a dual cab ute, because I wouldn't be using
Proven
this.
it doesn't really need
No, I
low
wouldn't be
range.
using this to go bush bashing anyway. So I'd probably still buy the Amarok, but we can't recommend it if you're a family buyer.
Yeah, our judges have said that it's been good at towing and not bad at load lugging as well.
That's it.
And for me, it's the confidence of having that V6 when overtaking as well. It really just does tick those boxes.
Well, mate, this one is probably still the best Chinese-built vehicle we've ever tested, really, the LDV.
Everything is compared to the Great Wall.
Everything is compared to the Great Wall, but I hate sort of a middling term, but this isn't a bad ute by
Yes.
any stretch. It's not
That's
bad at
correct.
all.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 5-star safety rating,
Yep.
comes with all the safety tech, and the kind of gear that if you're going to put an apprentice in a ute, but you do want to save money,
Yep.
this is the one to go for. But it is let down by some fairly basic stuff. So this infotainment screen looks fantastic. It's like
massive.
my computer back when I was growing up. Big
Yep.
screen, but it's also the equivalent of something like Windows 95 because the infotainment is
Pretty hard to get your head
diabolically
around.
bad.
The one good thing is you get CarPlay
Exactly.
and Android Auto, so
Yep.
you can switch over to smartphone.
What about the engine? I can see the bonnet shaking there, which is
Rattling
never a good
away
start.
up the front there, yeah, rattling away at 60 k's an hour. The engine isn't particularly refined, it's
Yep.
quite noisy, but it actually does its job okay. It's decent power and torque levels, and it gets around okay. What's interesting about it in terms of insulation, when we say the engine's not that refined, the actual cabin's not too bad. We've tested other much more expensive utes here where you've heard the rocks coming up,
Yes.
a lot noisier than you do in this.
Yep.
It's not too bad at all.
Yeah, exactly. So look, it does lack a little bit of punch, and our judges said that when you throw a caravan on the back, you do sort of feel that it is a little lacking there. But you do have your off-road equipment. The gearbox isn't too bad.
Yep.
It's okay to drive. The Australian ride and handling tune there is there as well. I mean, it's not the best tune in the world, but
I tell you what, and this is, it's one word that's a problem for this ute
Yes.
and any of the more affordable
Yep.
utes. One word, Triton.
yeah,
We say it all
exactly.
the time.
Yeah.
You know, if this was 10 or 15 grand cheaper than a Triton, you'd
Yep.
be tipping everyone
Yeah.
into one. But the problem
it's not, is it?
No, the Triton
Yeah.
is so competitively priced for what is a pretty accomplished dual cab. That's the only problem I think that these more affordable ones have got. Well, personal favourite of mine, this one, Paul, the Nissan Navara. I know a lot of the Australian motoring journalists say that the coil springs aren't as good as they could be. I disagree. I think on this kind of stuff, unladen, it's close to the best ute, if not the best ute in the class. And what I love most about the Navara for me, how do you tell someone to buy the Mercedes-Benz over this? And that should
Well,
be a compliment to how good Nissan
that's
is at
right.
doing what they've done.
I was just about to ask you, is this a poor man's Mercedes or is the Mercedes a rich man's Nissan?
No, this is definitely not a poor man's anything. I think it's really good, and I think it's one of those utes that it hasn't come in the top 3 at this test, but I think it's one of those utes that we recommend to people a lot for the very reason of driving around town. If you use it unladen, if you spend a lot of time without weight in the tray, I think this has got a really car-like interior. It's a lovely thing to drive, and it's really well behaved on road.
It is like a fine wine. It's kind of getting better with age.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
This is now the 4th revision of
That's
this
hard
car.
to believe too, that soon.
But it is getting better. That infotainment system is finally much better. You're getting CarPlay in there as well. Steering wheel still I find quite heavy, and the judges were saying that it can be a little tiresome, especially when you're doing low speed manoeuvres. But outside of that, you've got all the four-wheel drive controls. That coil spring rear gives it a really smooth ride. It's one of the few utes in this segment with a coil spring rear end. And my personal favourite thing is that sliding rear window at the back.
Yeah. The other quick thing, last point, coil springs offer you a lot of flexibility to modify off-road, as we've seen with the Navara that we own at Car Advice. So it's still a really strong option in this segment.
coming in a very, very respectable third, the Mitsubishi Triton. What do you reckon about that front end?
Look, I think it's not as ugly as the old one. You know,
That's
you and
true.
I used to have a running joke, and no, not us, because we are the running joke a lot of the time, but we used to have a running joke that was the best thing about a Triton is that you can't see it because you're driving it,
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
However, I think this is a lot better than the old one, but mate, I'm excited that this finished third. You know, I'm excited that the judges saw as many of the positives in this thing as we do, because we recommend these a lot. They're undoubtedly the value king. And when you compare them to other utes in the class, things like leather seats, heated seats in this particular example, and the tech that you get, it's tremendously good value for money, isn't it?
Okay, so let's have a look at the positives the judges pointed out. So, really good engine. So the engine is really capable and always keen to get up and go. You've got these cool metal paddle shifters. The gearbox isn't too fussy. It's really good off-road. You've got 4 high. It's one of the only ones that can be driven in four-wheel drive mode on a sealed surface as well. But there was a call out that in the offset mogul test, traction control just killed everything.
It did kill the drive, yeah, exactly, which is a bit of a concern because we've always liked these off-road and they're pretty competent off-road. I guess where it sort of doesn't finish at the top of the field is not so much that off-road ability, but the fact that it's not ultimately as refined as something like the Ford Ranger, which sets the standard in that segment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly right. You've got a really nice leather interior, and for the value-conscious person who still wants the safety, because it comes with all of the safety tech, it really fits the bill. Now, disappointed a bit with the towing. It's only 3,100 kilos.
That's right, yeah. And it didn't carry the weight as well as some of the others.
There was a bit of sag.
Yeah, with 650 kilos in the tray, but you counteract that with the warranty, which is so good. 7-year warranty, and it's had a 7-year warranty for a long time. So it's very impressive in that sense. And I think there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that if you're in the hunt for a really strong value dual cab ute, it's the Mitsubishi Triton. Well, Paul, guess what?
Tell me.
It's a Toyota Hilux, and it's up near the head of the class. Second place.
Well, that shows us, doesn't it,
Yeah.
that this is the best-selling car in the country, but it's not the best dual cab ute in the country.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, and we say that all the time. I mean, the most popular choices aren't always the best, but I guess what this testing has done, and the judges have explained, it's shown that the Hilux is right up there at the head of the segment for a whole bunch of different reasons.
Now, you may hear your voice quivering there. It's not because you're in my company.
I'm nervous, yeah,
It's
exactly.
because the ride is incredibly firm out the back
I'd
there.
call it fierce,
Yeah.
is what I'd call it.
Yeah, it is fairly choppy, and that is good if you're carrying load, because it is quite settled, but if you are driving unladen, which a lot of SR5 buyers are, this thing is going to be a little bit firm rather than soft. So, negatives. We're talking about a 3,200 brake towing capacity instead of 3,500 amongst some of the other competitors. The engine's also quite lackluster compared to the others.
Yeah, it just doesn't have as much punch. I mean, it doesn't do anything particularly wrong, but it just doesn't seem to do as much as easily as some of the others in the class.
Infotainment system lacks Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, which some of the competitors have. No dual zone climate control. Toyota has, though, added radar cruise control, which is good. AEB as well now across the range, which is excellent news. It really has picked up that offering, but do you reckon Toyota could be doing a bit more with it?
I think they could do a little better, and I think they probably should consider that. I mean, this is up near the top of the segment, and Toyota should look at this and think, okay, a lot of the areas where the Hilux has always been strong, off-road, it does well in towing, as you said, even though it's not the best performer necessarily, does carry the load really well in terms of working for a living. A lot of those areas where it's traditionally done well, it still does well, but Toyota should look at it and think, hang on a second, Ford is just ahead of us here for things like infotainment and the outer edge of that tech stuff, and they could fix that and add to it and potentially have the best ute in the segment as well.
Yeah, that's true, because they do a really good job with towing, and off-road this is almost unstoppable.
It is, yeah.
But it does have one of my pet peeves, which is not being able to engage the rear diff lock unless you're in low range, which is kind of frustrating.
A little bit annoying.
But this is second position according to our judges, and it does show you why they sell so many of these each year.
Absolutely, and the final point is their dealer network around Australia. If you're going off around Australia, towing a caravan, doing any off-road exploration, how do you go past the Toyota Hilux? It's just one of the great options.
Trent, we're in the winner, the
We
Ford
are.
Ranger.
This is really the clear leader for tech, comfort, drivability, refinement. We're on a bumpy dirt road. This thing rides really nicely, doesn't it?
It does, and that's a thing, we keep harping on about it, but Australian design and more importantly Australian engineering, it means that when you are driving it, it feels confident in Australian conditions, and that is gravel roads, it is uneven surfaces, and it's built for some off-roading as well. It really doesn't put a foot wrong when you compare it to the rest of the utes.
I think the other key too is right here, this gearbox. The 10-speed automatic works brilliantly with the 2-litre twin turbo diesel, and I don't know that anybody expected that engine to be as good as it is. So all round it's a great package. There is one negative though, I guess, and that's the rear end. Softened off for the update in 2018. It performs better unladen, but not quite at the top of the segment when you put load or when you tow it.
Yeah, exactly. And look, one of the things that I think is a standout that a lot of people are going to love, especially if they do the occasional bit of off-roading, and that is the ability to lock the rear differential when you're not in the low-range transmission mode. It also has all the latest safety technology built in across the range. You've got automatic features such as your stop-start system, you've got front-rear parking sensors. It really is a well-equipped car that is well and truly worthy of the title of the winner of our Big Ute comparison.
You comfortable there, mate?
I am. I'd invite you to join me, but I don't know that it'd support both of us, to be honest.
A lot of people say that the Triton still isn't very attractive. I tend to disagree, but we've found out that it's pretty useful.
It is very useful.
It is. Well, there you have it, guys. The judges have spoken, and this is our top 3. In 3rd place, Mitsubishi Triton. 2nd place, Toyota Hilux. And in 1st place, surprise, surprise, the Ford Ranger. What's not a surprise really is these are the top 2 selling vehicles in Australia, but it's no surprise that the Ranger won again.
Look, I'm kind of proud of this thing because as an Australian, this is designed and engineered here. It has an incredible amount of tech. It now comes with all the safety technology. I mean, Ford just is on a really good thing with the Ranger. I mean, do you agree or disagree with us? Everyone has an opinion, and while our judges have ranked them like this, tell us what you've bought. Tell us if we're wrong down in the comments below.
But just before you go on,
there's something missing though, right?
Well, there is something missing, which we'll get to in a sec, but just to cut through it a little bit, what does this do that the other utes don't do?
I don't know, it's hard to give you a tangible reason, but once you have your bum on the seat, it drives like a car. It comes with, I reckon, one of the best infotainment systems here. It's just very easy to use. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, so you have all that tech. It comes with all the safety tech. So if you are a tradie and you're getting your apprentices into this, you know that they're going to be safe in it. And now Ford's also focusing on the heavy-duty suspension in some of the models that allow you to cater for bigger loads on the trays. So they really have thought of everything.
Now, when you said there's something missing, I can feel something happening out there. I don't know if you can feel it, but I can feel the keyboard warriors warming up. They're getting ready. They're doing the stretches. The palms are getting sweaty. They're hovering over the keyboards, and they're about to say 2 things.
Yes.
They're about to say, oh, but there's no Ram 1500 there. Well, guess what? It's 80,000 bucks, and it's not a traditional dual cab in this segment. It's a bigger ute. It's completely different. The other one they're about to say is, where's the Great Wall? Well, it doesn't come in an automatic. So we specified, and it's rubbish, but we specified that these were all going to be automatic. So that's why those 2 are not here, but give us all your other thoughts, obviously.
Absolutely, especially those about Trent. Now, leave all your comments below. Head to the website to see the full comparison. It is a whopper of a thing, lots of photos there, and a lot more detail on towing and off-roading, which is a lot of the testing we've done over the past 2 weeks. This has taken a lot of effort to put together, so we're keen to hear thoughts. Follow us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you next time.